And welcome along to another edition of Tipp Cast with myself, Shane Brophy, Algonina Guardian, joined as ever by Noel Dundon, and joined this week by Brian Flannery, Tipperary man, exiled in Waterford, but he's dons the blue and gold jersey. I suppose many's the time you never forget your native sword, Brian.
Look, once you're from Tipperary, you're always from Tipperary. You take that from cradle to grave. But look, I suppose I'm domiciled in Waterford longer than anywhere else, I suppose, at this time. So kind of dual citizenship. But the great thing about it is it allows me to go to an awful lot of games. I trip up to Thurles as often as I can, and I'm at most of the Waterford games as well. So look, I'm not complaining anyway.
No, and just before we crack on into reviewing, I suppose, the recent events, Killadangan, hard to believe, Brian, 20 years ago since your native parish won the All-Ireland Intermediate, that historic day in Thurles, and on this Saturday, that great team are officially unveiling the new impressive developments to put on a new all-weather pitch and ball wall. So, you think of that team, I remember growing up like Dan Hackett, Jerry Slattery, Paddy Lynch, Darry Egan, names that tipped off the tongue, like, so hard to believe it's 20 years.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I know the Killadangan on social media, they're poking out a lot of content and photos and videos from that occasion. So it's great to look back. It's amazing how these fly. Killadangan, I suppose, are a real success story from, a club that from, typical intermediate club for most of its existence, dipped down to junior, came back. First of all, I suppose, to win, into step by step, I suppose, winning a North Intermediate, then eventually winning a County Intermediate, and I suppose to win the first club in the country to win the All-Ireland Intermediate title. That was actually the first iteration of it when Killadangan won it. I think they beat St. Thomas's maybe in a semi-final along the way. So, huge achievement. I suppose, look, I was in Pecan recently. The facilities are fantastic. The new all-weather and ball wall, to have two fine pitches, one floodlit stand. It's a credit to everybody involved in, I suppose, the club back there, not just what they've achieved, but the developments that they made. Look, it'll be a special occasion, to open the pitch, and, it is great that they're honouring that team that really were, I suppose, pioneers, for the want of a better word, because that was the beginning of it, the success for Killadangan, and to have, developed on that and gone on and won senior county titles. It is really the great success story, I suppose, in recent times in club hurling in Tipperary.
Absolutely. Wish them the best with that. I think it's 5:00. They're officially cutting the ribbon on Saturday evening. I don't think we've had a show, Noel, since I think the Kilkenny game, and I suppose there's a lot of positivity, and then after the Clare match into a league final, first league final in 7 years, and then we got definitely punctured a bit last Sunday with the league final defeat to Cork. I suppose it was probably something that a lot of people, maybe it was probably outside of maybe a bad loss, maybe being crushed in the second half. The last thing you wanted going into the championship was a bit of a demoralising defeat. And look, while they saved a bit of face in the second half, like that 15-minute spell before half time, I suppose that it sort of reminded you of maybe the tip of the last few years, like when the pressure comes on, we sort of done it. We still struggle to stem the flow of a barrage at the moment.
Yeah, it was fairly demoralising to see it happen like that, and from the point of view of most Tipperary supporters who have watched this team develop since the very first game in Salt in Galway, you'd be kind of saying to yourself, look, at the league served its purpose for us, really, even if the league final maybe mightn't have. We have unearthed the players that a number of players that we were looking for, and while they came under a hell of a lot of pressure on Sunday in Cork, at least to have that experience behind them. The closest that Tipperary could get to actual championship fare ahead of the opening round of the championship was going to be a league final. You're not going to come across too many situations where you're playing a league final down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh in a cauldron which was practically all Cork. Support wise, 40 odd thousand Cork people there. It was as big a challenge as they're going to get ahead of the championship. Now that they've that experience under their belt, it's probably another thing that Liam Cahill would be checking off in the box. The one thing that you would be afraid of is that maybe it will lead to a little bit of sort of down in the momentum and downing of the confidence going into the Limerick game. But I don't think it will, though. I think Tipperary have been very, very much looking at the 20th of April as being the day, Easter Sunday. That was going to be the day that they've been focusing on all year long, and anything that they got in between was going to be a bit of a bonus. And I think we've had a few bonuses in between.
Yeah, I don't know, Brian, you were down there on Sunday. I know you're predominantly focusing on the Waterford game, but you were able to sit back and have an eagle eye on the Division 1 final. Like I said, there's no doubt about it. It wasn't championship fair. Like, the intensity probably wasn't there in terms of the big hits and things like that. Probably it had a sort of a atmosphere in terms of the crowd. But like, from your point of view, were Tip exposed? Were they off the pace? Were Cork that good? What were your thoughts when you reflected on it?
Yeah, I suppose, look, if you look at the early stages of the game, it was kind of, it was nice and open. There was nice, lovely scores at both ends. I think it was maybe 8 points each or 9 points each. It was kind of end to end, and you were saying, God, yeah, this is grand. That was a bit loose maybe or whatever, but it was grand. I suppose the concern for Tipperary is once they were hit, particularly with the first goal, that there is times in a game when it's maybe going against you that you need to shut down a little bit, and the fact that a second and a third goal didn't come so quickly after it, they're the concerning points, I suppose. Also, I suppose the overall side of it is that, would you be certain if you were sitting down to pick the team today or tonight, what would the starting Tipperary team be? The big concern, and look, it's for most counties, is can you get half forwards that can win their own ball? Probably the lack of pressure at that end of the field. The likes of Owen Connolly then being under pressure at the other end of the field. When you don't have enough pressure, particularly on midfield half forwards, Tim O'Mahony seemed to have the freedom of Páirc Uí Chaoimh there, and could sort of stand up and pick his passes. There just wasn't enough, I suppose, energy around that area. I think, they're probably a lot of the best Tipperary players were on the field. So, some of them will just have to work through it. And, Alan Tynan certainly has had better days in a blue and gold jersey. Gerard O'Connor he's a very young player with a lot of talent. You'd like to see him develop a bit more aggression in his game. There certainly was a bit of lacking of bite. Again, like you said, I was able to sit back and relax and watch it. I suppose as a supporter, I did feel Darren McCarthy got an awful lot of attention off the ball from Sean O'Donoghue. Eventually, the referee went in and brandished the yellow card. But, I suppose, again, there's Tommy Vara players wouldn't be shy about minding themselves in typically. So, from that point of view, it's a learning experience. I imagine that won't happen to Darren McCarthy again. I imagine, Gerard O'Connor, these guys are going to be, you'd learn from those occasions where there's a little bit pressure, 40 odd thousand in the stadium. It's hard to replicate that in training. So there's certainly learnings from it. Are Tipperary any further where they were 12 months ago? I suppose, look, that'll yet be decided. Liam Cahill, I suppose, spoke positively after the game that they had learned an awful lot through the league, and I'm sure they learned a lot more after the final as well. You do suspect Cork are that little bit ahead of everybody, and I suppose, look, you take that into consideration as well. But look, this Munster Championship, you could actually play quite well and lose all 4 games. That's the reality of it. But for every county, that first game, Easter Sunday for Tipperary, that's going to be etched in everybody's mind. You come out of that with a positive result, everything is possible. You really don't want to be going to Páirc Uí Chaoimh trying to get something. I think Cork won't be beaten in Páirc Uí Chaoimh this year. The support they have, I think they have both Tipperary and Waterford in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. I think they're two almost, very difficult tasks. I think points that will be garnered will be got maybe elsewhere.
No. I think Tip's issues. I think in that period where they came under pressure was puck outs, both their own and trying to counteract Patrick Collins' puck outs. It was from our own ones first, and I thought it was an interesting comment Liam Cahill made afterwards that we just need to be a little bit more brave. I just wonder, was that aimed at Barry Hogan for maybe not forcing more sharp, riskier puckouts? Or I'd say probably the latter is maybe guys weren't showing as they were in earlier matches when Barry Hogan was able to get puckouts away fairly effectively. And then on the other side, when Patrick Collins was getting puckouts away in the first half, even though Tip sat off them, he was able to pick his mid-range puckouts off far, far too easily. Like if you're going to sit off, you have to cut off that mid-range puckout.
Yeah, but again, I suppose the pressure is amped.
Yeah, far too easily, Shane.
I start with Noel first.
Yeah, sorry. Far too easily, Shane, Patrick Collins to pick out his men. And in fact, watching it, you could see that it wasn't just that he was pucking the ball out to his full back line. He was actually able the line was actually carried on further on. The full backs were to deliver onto the half back and almost down to the half forward line at ease. And I couldn't understand what was going on, to be honest with you. I was watching this and saying, how are we allowing this to happen? Particularly when we had a man further back as well, and I suppose the worrying thing from a Tip perspective is that we were playing the sweeper role as well, and still Cork seemed to be able to go through us with relative ease to create those goals and create those chances. And even Cork picked off quite a few long range points as well from out the field, not to mention all the wides that they had. I think had the game been any closer, and we might have been in it up to the closing stages, Cork supporters would have been going nuts over the number of wides that they struck, and some of them very poor wides. Now you might ask, well, what's a good wide? But there were a lot of them were quite poor, But in terms of us being brave, or that we need to be more brave, I guess when you're under pressure, it's easy to turn your back and walk away and not maybe look for that pass, that short pass, or that quick puck out or whatever, and that can get in on the team very quickly. But maybe too, Liam was referring to the bravery that was needed on the part of our own attack when Cork were going to puck out the ball, taking that chance to try and intercept that pass, going quick rather than just allowing the Cork lads to restart as they wish to do so. It was frustrating watching it, I have to say. It really was.
What about you, Brian? Like, what were your thoughts on both Tip's own puck outs and how they dealt with the Cork one?
Yeah, I think I think Noel touched on it there. I think there was, maybe the Tip forwards were a little bit passive in closing down their players. It's one thing, ball going to a corner back, but then when it's hit up to a wing back and he's still on his own, I think that's way too passive. And the other side of the field, then the movement of the likes of Fitzgibbon, Shane Barrett, Healy, like the pace they have, if pressure on the ball at the other end of the field, you can have an extra man, you can have Mar stand in the centre, but they'll play it around you. I think they just need to be, maybe that's bravery, maybe that's the bravery Liam Cahill was talking about, where they need to just push up. And it does mean, you might be taking at the other end of the field where you're 50-50, and it's every man for himself. And okay, you may be leaving from your full backline on an island, but that may be a better option where you have not that perfect ball coming in gives the full back a better chance of winning it than the perfect ball bouncing in front of Patrick Horgan or Alan Connolly and you're at 9. So maybe just a little bit too passive. There is times in the game, and I suppose for me the concern is there are times when you will need to hit someone who can win their own ball and puck out. And I think that was you were trying to engineer, I suppose, maybe a structure where you got Alan Tynan maybe in space, Sam O'Farrell, and it happened a couple of times, but probably not often enough, and you really didn't have the ability, that if you put it down 50-50 on top of someone, you had no confidence that to be a player in blue and gold was going to win that. And that's an issue. That's probably the most difficult one to solve. At times there was good movement where Sam O'Farrell, drifted and picked up loose ball or picked up the puck out. But when things tightened up a little bit, then you could see that. And like Nola said, there was kind of almost guys running in the wrong direction. You felt that they weren't showing for the puck out. They were kind of running into where the ball couldn't be hit. So there's bravery there that's required as well. But look, I'm sure that hasn't passed the attention of Lynn Cahill and the management team and players. I'm sure when they review it, at this level, at the highest level, if you're going to compete in Munster, it takes bravery all over the field. No doubt. The likes of Kennelly who come on, Darius Stakeham did certainly added a little bit to it, and will come into contention. So that competition is healthy as well.
Yeah, just Brian, I know that I think there's one criticism that we hear. There's a lot from supporters at the moment is how we tend to concede the puck out, that we don't push up and force teams to maybe go along. And I would have thought throughout the league, and we have when Joe Caesar, Ronan Maher, and Ryan O'Mara, three big half-backs that can compete in the air. Like, are the management more worried that, okay, if we do that, fine, but if the ball breaks and we're one-on-one, that they're not certain about their defence, like, and that by they're trying to sit off and create traps, but not an awful lot of those traps are snaring opposition players in possession.
Yeah, and I suppose, look, it's difficult to make that work for you in hurling in particular, because the ball can travel so far, so quick. If you drop off too far, you'll have the team of Mannies, which happened a couple of occasions.
Yeah.
And scoring from distance. I think it at times it's a kind of like fool's gold. You think you have a lot of players behind the ball and back, but it invariably doesn't work unless you have savage work rate in from your 5 forwards, maybe chasing 6 backs, and that you can put that extra bit of pressure on, because it's just Cork are too good, they're too quick, the movement is too much. I don't think you can have the luxury of having an extra defender just standing at the edge of the D marking no one, not against most teams. And I think hurling has kind of moved on a bit from sweepers and at stage as well. So I think you need defenders to defend. You give them the assistance by making sure there's pressure on the ball coming in, more so than having an extra player on his own. Yeah,
it was like I thought Robert Doyle did as well as he could, and Patrick Horgan. I thought Michael Breen had another excellent game. Like, Owen Connolly had his hands full with Alan Connolly, but like some of the ball there, those 3 forwards working with was top class. Like, I think you could have JJ Delaney at his best and they'd struggle. Like Noel. Like, it has to come from out the field to slow down that supply.
Yeah, it does, Shane. And Brian was a cornerback as well, and he'd know that the kind of ball that was going in there is into the forwards, is exactly what the backman doesn't want. It was out in front of him, given the opportunity to get onto the ball with maybe a yard to play with, and like those top forwards are going to hurt you. But you're dead right. Like the pressure has to come from further out the field, and it struck me on Sunday watching the game that we were really missing the likes of Conor Stakeham at his best, because he's such a busy player out around the middle that he gets around the place with a lot of energy and all that. His brother Dara came on, and as Brian said there, he made a difference when he came in. But I think that kind of a swashbuckling type of player was needed on Sunday, and we just didn't have it. I was actually a little bit surprised at how quickly Willie Connors was taken off. I know he'd had a couple of possessions that went astray in that.
I think it was more injury related. I think he carried something into the game, and obviously that maybe didn't feel it was. Yeah, I thought it was a strange one at the time that he was picked out, but it's like I thought we had some decent puck out options until he went off. Like, because Willie's definitely one guy that doesn't shy away from offering himself for a mid-range puck out. I think it was after that we started to run out of options.
Yeah, he doesn't shy away from it, and he's well able to take a score as well, But the kind of energy that Willie has brought to the middle of the field this year, his partnership, Shane, we've spoken about it quite a few times, that the partnership between Willie and Craig Morgan has been very, very good. Now they're under savage pressure on Sunday, and a lot of that pressure as well was stemming from the fact that the Cork half backline was so dominant. That there was little or no ball breaking in the middle of the field. It was being claimed outright, and that led to Cork then being able to double back on possession to tee up the deliveries into the forward line. And as we've said, the kind of quality ball that was going into Connolly and Horgan and these guys, it's very, very difficult to defend against that. People are saying that Owen Connolly, our fullback, was under savage pressure, and he was. But I think anybody would be under pressure with that kind of possession going into Connolly, because he's a top forward, And the interesting thing about it as well is that not only was Connolly getting that ball, but when he turned to go, he also had people on his shoulder to give it off to, which meant that they were coming through from the half forward line as well. Like, Cork are a well-oiled machine. There's no two ways about it. And anybody that goes down to Páirc Uí Chaoimh is going to earn whatever they get, if they get anything.
Yeah, I think that was one noticeable thing, Brian, I thought from watching the view we had, is that Cork got 3 goals, probably from their 3 goal chances. Tipp got into some nice areas where if they took the ball on, like Sam O'Farrell got a couple of into pockets, Craig Morgan got through, Jason Ford took on his man, pulled down for a free fine. But there was a couple of when Craig went through and Sam went through, nobody was on his shoulder. It's as if the other forwards didn't come alive to think, okay, I'm going to put myself in a position to take a pass here. That Cork have that's one part of the jigsaw Tipp have got to figure out, is okay, we did actually open up Cork, but we didn't go for the jugular like they did.
Yeah, I think Sam O'Farrell is a real top class young player, but I think probably the thing that he hasn't at the moment is that blister and pace. I think the chances that opened up it did open up a couple of times probably for him, and he opted. I think he got 2 points maybe in total. He another maybe wide that he should have scored from.
I think he carried it a bit far, but he had no options. He sort of ran into a cul-de-sac, but he had no really options.
You're right. There was nobody off his shoulder. But I think if that was at the other end of the field, a Darragh Fitzgibbon or a Shane Barrett, they're taking that ball in and going for goal. There is an argument that, is there enough pace in this Tipperary team, which is probably a common theme for the last few years. And I think, look, Sam O'Farrell, I think he's a player for the current, he's a player for the future. He, whether it is, I think it was more or less wing forward he was operating for most of the.
I was very surprised he never played there before.
Yeah, look, he's probably in a better halfback than half forward, which is a different, is a different game altogether, really, where you can come forward and score points. But he's probably used to being in a position where it opens up in front of him and the goal is on, and he probably doesn't have that experience at this stage, to take it in. I'm not sure if he has the pace either, as I said, that you compare with the Darragh Fitzgibbon of this world as well. So maybe it was unfortunate. It was the wrong man with the ball, the wrong time or the wrong place as well.
But I think. But if other guy, if the scoring forwards around him said, okay, this is Sam, I'm gonna get myself into a position where either A, I support him, or B, I draw my defender to maybe open up a hole for him to go through. And that I didn't see enough of the 6 forwards working in a sort of as much as you. As a team, or that sensing, okay, just because I don't have the ball doesn't mean I can't draw a defender out of his way or something.
Yeah, and I think you're touching on something there, because there was certainly once or twice as well where Jake Morris got the ball, and again, probably too far from goal, the only way to create a goal at that stage is if you do have someone off your shoulder from deep, like a train. Jake Morris, again, the question is, is he better centre forward or is he better closer to goal? You probably need that threat in front of goal. These are things that I suppose, given the fact that Darren McCarthy was completely tied up in the game, it made it very difficult as well. There wasn't, you didn't have that collective, I suppose, effort, or you didn't have, Cork seemed to come in waves, in 2s and 3s. It was more of an individual effort with the Tipperary forwards. You didn't have that sort of runners off the shoulder coming from deep, from midfield. And again, look, Jason Ford, it's great to see him back in top form. Fantastic, player of his, with his first touch will get you an awful length. He probably doesn't have that blistering pace to get on the shoulder of guys as well. So that's a difficult thing now for Liam Cahill and the manager, is to get the balance right, to have enough ball winners in the forwards, have enough workers, have enough finishers, have players who threaten. I'm trying to think that chap from Kilsheelan, Mark Keogh,
he's not there though. Yeah,
he's not there. He's that player that has that pace.
Smell for goal.
Sean Hayes, Kildangan, has got a few runs. Maybe another player with pace. It's to try find that balance. That's not going to be easy, because we're talking about Craig Morgan and Willie Connors in the middle of the field. One of them ended up sitting in the stand, and the other ended up wing back. So there's just uncertainty that's unusual to have come through a good league campaign, ended up in the league final, and yet there's as many questions, I suppose, about Tipp senior team today as there was at the start of the league. And that's and look, time will tell. Whether it's very difficult to get out of Munster, but given the nature of the competition, you'd expect that Tipperary will, of the supposed top three of Cork, Limerick and Clare, that Tip will knock one of them somewhere along the line.
Yeah, but I suppose I would say that the Tip team that started last weekend is probably somewhere close to what we thought was going to be their championship team against Limerick. So, yeah. Do you see many potential changes maybe for Sunday week? I personally, I don't think they emptied themselves. Neither did Cork. You couldn't afford to go 100% at it last weekend, because you just wouldn't be physically or psychologically ready in time for the first round of the championship, which was the focus for them. This was the question everybody is asking all year, is what are teams holding back? And I think John Fogarty, the Examiner, asked that of Liam Cahill afterwards. Everybody's holding something back, and I wonder, will Tip try something? Will they go like Cork and play 3 up and stay in very deep? You would think that maybe the best way for Tip to try and beat games is use what you're good at, your good forwards, and try and outscore the other team. Okay, maybe you might leave yourself slightly more open at the back, but if you had Jake, Dara and Jason Ford closer to goal, and maybe instead of one of them maybe drifting out and floating around, that it might serve Tip better. It'll be interesting to see whether they do throw something different maybe at Limerick on Sunday week.
Yeah, I being honest with you, Shane, I don't think there would be any major changes to the team. I think we went down pretty strong to Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Right, did we hold something back? I suppose we'll only know that when it comes to the game against Limerick. But I would say that we have kind of preoccupied ourselves in Tipperary over the last couple of years with matching the Limericks of this world. And Limerick play a very, very different game to the Cork game, the game that Cork are playing. So we've been gearing our season towards that game with Limerick on the 20th of April in Semple Stadium, and maybe gearing it towards trying to get something from that game. Then you go down, you meet a different type of challenge entirely, and Cork are very, very, very mobile and fast. Cork team, I'm not saying Limerick aren't mobile and fast, but they're maybe a little bit more physical than Cork in some respects, particularly around that middle third. And I just hope that what we saw in Páirc Uí Chaoimh was a little bit of a departure from what we would be expecting to see on the 20th of April. Realistically, when you look at it, we're looking to try and get something out of that game in Semple Stadium, because we go back down to Páirc Uí Chaoimh, we go down to the All-Ireland champions in Ennis, and we have Waterford coming to Semple Stadium. So if we have designs on getting out of Munster this year, we have to take down one of the big 3, or at least not lose to one of the big 3, and then hope that we have enough to beat Waterford, which we haven't had for the last couple of seasons either. So Munster is a minefield, we all know that, but that's it in stark terms. We need to beat Limerick or get a result there. We need to beat Cork or get a result there, or we need to beat Clare in Ennis, the All-Ireland champions, or get some kind of a result there. Outside of the 15 or 16, 17 players that we would have been looking to last Sunday, I don't see that there's going to be any major changes. Will Noel come into it, for instance, Noel McGrath? Maybe. Will he start? I don't know. Would John get a start? I don't know. Perhaps, considering the way that the thing went in the forward line last weekend, Lee might be looking to shake that up a little bit. But we're still going to be working off the same 20, 22 or 3 players, I would imagine,
Yeah, and we'll probably come back next week just to look ahead to the Munster Championship. But just Brian, probably have you just to touch on Waterford. Won the Division 1B final. Wasn't dominant, okay. I could say a few nervy moments towards the end when Offaly were coming like a train. But I think I texted you a while back. Like, Waterford are in the perfect position. Like, everyone's talking about Limerick, Cork, and Clare, and if one of them slips up, it's Tipp. But like, I think Waterford are in a lovely spot. The schedule sort of sits up nicely for them. They have Clare at home first. I think that's all depends. It could be a very, very winnable game. They won't fear going to Thurles. I actually think mobility-wise, they'll have enough to trouble Cork. Whether to beat them, I don't know. Limerick will be a challenge because I know Waterford have struggled a bit against Limerick. But like, it's I'd say outside of maybe Austin Gleeson and his injury problems, I'd say Peter Queally, and bouncing back from the Carlow defeat first up, I'd say Peter Queally couldn't have asked for much more.
Yeah, look, I think the key thing for Waterford, like I suppose most counties, is having your best players on the field as often as possible. When Waterford have to go down the line a bit, they've struggled. There are very few. There are very few first timers or starters in the game against Carlow, and you saw the difficulties there, but with everybody on board, a full deck, Waterford are going to be competitive. Clare up in they've a bye in the first round, so they've Clare on April the 27th. Clare will have played Cork at that, and 7 days later to go to Welsh Park. All-Ireland champion, not that that could be a difficult occasion for Clare, and Waterford will be throwing the kitchen sink at that game. The first 2 games are at home Clare, home to Limerick. They've got, a bit like Noel was saying, they've got something out of those 2 games, because I don't fancy anybody going to Páirc Uí Chaoimh and getting a result. And the last game for Waterford is in Tipperary. And I suppose, look, most people are saying that it's Waterford and Tipperary that aren't going to come out of Munster. I suppose the big hope certainly is that by the time that game comes around, that both counties have something to play for, because to be a pity to have a dead rubber in Simple Stadium, Waterford and Tipperary. Both will have to get something, from the game against the perceived big. And for me, for Waterford, it's that first game with Clare coming in, maybe a bit battered, having played Cork the week before. If they can get 2 points on the board there. I suppose, look, if you bigger picture from a Waterford perspective, months ago, Waterford beat Cork in the Munster Championship, who were the All-Ireland finalists, and went to Ennis and lost by a point to, play a controversial 65 near the end of it. They're not that far off. That's the very little between winning and losing in Munster, qualifying and not qualifying. Had they, was the regret from a Waterford perspective is thanks up against Tipperary in Welsh maybe 4 minutes to go, and they failed to close it out. Had they have won that game, they would have effectively knocked Cork out of the championship. Yeah. So they would have had the head-to-head win over Cork. So there's a lot of optimism in Waterford at the moment. Money is certainly a world away from the championship. But at the time, they won the games they had to win. They beat Dublin at home. That was the key game that got them the promotion. Beat twice now. There were 15 points up with a handful of minutes to go, and you had a bit of a Billy Nolan was behind to the umpire to get the spare, do a quick poke out, and didn't realise that hit the post, and it was bundled over the line by Ushing. Those things happen. That you'd imagine that won't happen on a chip day. So, yeah, look, the with you, the big hope is that by the time Waterford travel to Semple Stadium, the counties have something to play for. Waterford minors are on a good run at the moment, which is giving a big boost to hurling the county. Unfortunately, 20s are finding things a little difficult, and it's amazing to believe Waterford won the All-Ireland 21 in 2016. They haven't been a game at the grade carried. It's a statistic that, you know, for the last 9 years, you know, would signpost issues in the coming in relation to the senior team, but there's a lot of positives, I suppose, in particular minors, and you know, a bit of silverware. Look, it's always a help, and the fact that they've won 6 league games heading into the championship, you know, breeds confidence, albeit at a lower level. But up against Clare, that's the one to win.
Yeah, and I suppose speaking of our own underage teams, Noel, the minors, 2 defeats from 2, lost to Clare by 2 points, sort of similar fashion to Waterford. Were ahead probably down the home straight and just ended up losing by 2 points. And I suppose next Wednesday the under-20s are playing Clare, and I suppose a lot of the view on that one will be, will Darren McCarthy and Sam O'Farrell play? And like, it's hard to see how they can really. Like, it's, if you want them fresh and producing, and like, for the seniors on the Sunday, they've got to be held back. And I guess that's where the balancing act that has to come. And I suppose the fact that some people were surprised that the 2 lads played last week in Cork, but I suppose they had no choice really. Then maybe they suffered a small bit in terms of having the being fresh for the senior game, but I suppose that 20 game had to be won, and they did it comfortably. I thought it was a very, very poor Cork team, but Tipp did what they had to do, even though I'd say after 15 minutes, I'd say some of their play was, I'd say they could be more clinical, but in terms of bouncing back from the Limerick game, it was a good win.
It was, Shane, and to be honest with you, it was probably a little bit unexpected that they would bounce back as well. In fact, I would have, if I was a betting man, I would have backed the minors to bounce back a little better than the under-20s. But in fairness, the boys went down to Cork and they hurled up against a team that disappointed me. The Cork team, I thought were very disappointing, even when they were on the ball. Like, they were quite poor on the ball. Unfortunately, it wasn't the forecast of what was to come a few days later on the Sunday, but that's the way it goes. In terms of the minors, you know, if we get anything now, we're really looking at third place to get out of Munster if we can. It's a difficult task. And, you know, with under-17s, like, when you have 2 defeats behind you, it sometimes gets into the mind and all that. So it's going to be a real task for James Woodlock and his management team to try and turn that around and get the heads right and all the rest of it and go again. You mentioned Darren McCarthy and Sam O'Farrell with the under-20s, and then playing with the senior team. You know, it's almost like a dress rehearsal for what's going to happen next week, and then leading on into the game on the 20th. A difficult one for Liam Cahill to try and juggle around as well, because you would kind of think that the under-20s will have call on them. You know, that would have been the way in the past anyway, that you're the team that you're young, you know, the team that you're up to the age for is the one that you play with. Does that continue on into senior? It's a difficult one, you know. I would say definitely the 2 lads probably suffered on Sunday from having played on the Wednesday as well. You're talking about preparing for really tough games, and they do take a lot out of players. So it's going to be a juggling act, you know. I don't know what they'll do. You know, Dara has been a huge part of the Tipp Senior story this year. His free taking has been excellent. Fortunately, you know, Jason is able to slot in there, and Gerard O'Connor too if we need a free taker. Sam, there's possibly more cover out the field for the likes of Sam O'Farrell
and he's the under-20 captain too. So like that's you know, people read into captaincy, but like he was chosen as the leader of that group.
Exactly. And what does it say to the other guys on the under-20 panel if you leave out your 2 senior panelists off the team? You know, does it kind of say, well, we're half throwing it there, you know? in favour of the senior team. So I think they'll have to play in the 20, to be honest with you, and just hope that we get them, we get a sufficient recovery into the legs and into the body, so that they'll be ready to go again on Sunday if they're selected.
Brian, I think I'm of the opposing view. I don't think they'll play, and I think that you say to Brendan Cummins, like, okay, I don't have these guys, but who's going to take on the mantle of leadership? Is Jamie Ormond going to come in? And people are saying that he should be starting anyway. Robbie Ryan, like, will other players emerge without them as well? So like there's a double-edged sword with this thing, isn't there?
Look, I don't envy the decision-making process there, because it's not an easy one. I suppose traditionally, the under-21 championship always took place maybe the Wednesday before the senior team or the Wednesday after. Albeit you had much less games, it was straight knockout in both competitions. So it is a difficult one. I think you'd still see the under 20s, field without Sam McFarlane and your talisman Darren McCarthy. There's something about that, your own age group first that to like. I know, as I said, going back into the day, Munster final against Clare back in 95, they pulled the Ollie Bakers, their three, I think there may be 4 seniors. They didn't play them in the Munster final Wednesday and lost.
I suppose that's the balancing act too. Like, Tipp would probably afford to lose, but then the last game of Waterford is the midweek of the Limerick Cork game in senior, like, so they're probably not going to play in that one either. And I'd say if Tipp won one of their last 2 in under 20s, it probably will be enough to get them into a semi-final, like, so. And you're probably all bets are all probably off at that stage. You probably know where you are with senior and stuff like that. So, like, we all know that this is probably the guts of the Clare team that won the minor 2 years ago. So, like, they'll be going at full strength. I think bar Jack O'Neill, he might be on the bench with their seniors against Cork, but there's no starter on the under 20s that's going to play against Cork in the senior championship.
Yeah, I think Offaly are probably the other county that has sort of similar numbers, or maybe even a couple of exits on it, and they're facing the same, albeit maybe it's not, I suppose I shouldn't say it, not as much pressure on championship games. And it is a difficult one to juggle. I don't envy, I suppose, Liam Cahill and Brendan Cummins to make those decisions. I'm sure both managers want to be picking from a full deck. I don't know the decision-making process. Is there a county board necessary or involved in it? It's. I think maybe you hope.
I would have thought maybe both. I would like to think both men would probably have trashed it out before the start of the season. That if who has first call in it, like, I would have thought maybe the seniors have first call in that. He's their. Yeah, I know. Yeah, but that they've graduated already, if you know what I mean. Like, and every senior, and that it's all about. Yeah, just losing you there for Brian.
No, just saying. Look, every man is their own team predominantly. Yeah. I'm not so sure. Look, they're both, 2 Tipperary servants in Liam Cahill and Brendan, but they both are competitors. Both want their team to win first and foremost. Yeah. I think maybe hopefully results might make the decision that little bit easier, and if there was an opportunity to them from the under 20s that the enough points on the board to have secured, I think that would be the best solution, because I don't envy, I would like to referee that discussion, to be honest with you, because both very key players to both under 20 and senior teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose we move to the big ball. I suppose there was positive result for Tipp on Saturday night. They beat Waterford, got a bit of revenge for last year, 122-119, tight for a finish, but Tipp probably the dominant team all through. And I suppose we saw, the importance of, with Tipp are in transition, a lot of new faces, but the value of experience. Noel Stephen O'Brien back from injury, I think 1-8 in at full forward. Like, if Tipp had him in the back end of the league, could a couple of those defeats turn into wins? Like we said, we don't have an awful lot of experience. But look, in terms of a bit of positivity, it was a good win.
It was Shane, yeah, 1-8 by half time.
Yeah.
It was a great performance by Stephen. Showed his value to the team, but also showed tremendous leadership. I thought, at a time when I think he kicked 3 2-pointers. Two from frees and one from play, but he was constantly looking for the ball outside of that area to rack up the 2-pointers, and showed a lot of movement and a lot of clever movement around that semicircle to get outside and to be on the end of moves to take ball and to have a go. He was tremendous on the night, and notably as well, I think when he was taken off with maybe about 45 minutes gone in the game, that Waterford began to come back into it a little bit, and Waterford actually finished the game very strong. And from a position of Tipp being quite comfortable, we were suddenly not quite as comfortable, as the game came down to final straight. But you mentioned Stephen, but also I think you'd have to point as well to the two Killinall men, the two Killinall brothers, the Feehans, actually at the heart of the defence. Plenty of experience there as well, and they certainly showed up as well on Saturday night when experience was needed and cool heads were needed. Paddy and Jimmy Feehan were really good.
Yeah, and I suppose I think the likes of Manus are back. Had Micheál Freeney, I think, has had a very, very good league as well. Keane Smith has done well, and it's a sort of interesting scenario now, Brian, where they're playing Clare in a semi-final, and anytime you listen to Philly throughout the National League, he was saying we're building towards the Tailteann Cup, so that effectively means I don't know if they're going to throw a match against Clare, but I'm not saying they're going to go down and try not to win it, but I don't think Tipp are not ready to play with the big boys in the senior championship. I do wonder if you're a Division 4 team, should you be confined to the Tailteann Cup regardless whether you get to a provincial final? Because it'd be great if they did, and look, you could play the Dubs or Tyrone, but you've got to be able to compete, and Tipp are not ready yet. So, and look, they'll have it all to do to beat Clare anyway. But it's sort of a weird position to be in. Was I think their choice for Philly would be for development to be in the Tailteann Cup this year rather than maybe shocking Clare and having 3 very, very tough games in the All-Ireland Championship.
Yeah, look, I watched Clare last year. They came to Field to play Waterford in the semi-final. I do think, look, have been operating at a higher level for the last couple of years. I think, I don't think they'll have to worry, to be honest. I'd be shocked if Clare win that game being straight up. The Division 4 is, from the outside of maybe the top teams in Division 4, there's a fairly large gap or a big, the other teams, and say teams operating in Division 3 and 2, the gulf is significant. I suggest, and if you're struggling to beat Waterford have been bottom of division for the last 2 years. Be it their game, committed in what Tipperary, I suppose, are similar to Waterford in the last couple of years. Huge turnovers. It will time for Tipperary to build back as that can compete, with teams that are operating in Division 2 and 3. So I think he's probably been pragmatic about the expectation that Tipperary will get into Tailteann Cup.
Yeah, but it would be a situation like 10 minutes to go and they're in the game in Ennis. Like, that'd be an interesting scenario. Then, like, you want to win, but I suppose you take it. And if you do end up winning, you deal what happens after that. Like, but it's maybe an interesting now if it does get into the last few minutes and it's a score game.
It is. I suppose the other thing, I think there's a gap now. Waterford, obviously, there's a gap. They have a gap to the start of the, like, it's it's not a nice structure either. Yeah, ideal, to be honest with you. Yes, I get the fact that if you're going to develop, you need more games. But there is that that Division 4 side, Waterford will struggle in the Cup. Maybe Tipperary will have a better run of it. They have a better history than it, but maybe there's a need for a tighter, outside cup. There does seem to be quite a split in the quality of the Tailteann Cup, and again, some of the mid-table to lower ranked Division 4 sides, it does seem to on the
and we'll probably get an indication probably on Sunday when Wicklow play Dublin, and see how actually that Division 1 versus Division 4, how big that gulf is. And just back to you, Noel, before we wrap up, I suppose probably the bigger football match next week will not be the seniors, will be the under-20s on Tuesday. They go down to Cork to play Cork. The last round of the round robin, it's effectively a semi-final. The winner goes to the Munster final against Kerry. A draw would be enough for Cork and score difference, but I saw this team last year. I was very impressed with how they set up, they were a young team. We were sort of setting them up for this year. I thought that the score against Kerry and New Inn was very harsh. They cut Kerry open numerous times, just didn't convert. If you go by Kerry won by 10 against Cork, they won by 12 against Tipp. So on the balance of that, you would think Tipp have every chance going down to Cork. And if they could get that and get into a Munster final, and look, I know they're a very impressive group with a very impressive manager. So I suppose minimum, you just hope they perform on the night and give themselves a chance maybe in the last 10 minutes to go and get a result.
Yeah, we've had high hopes for this team, Shane, for a while, and they haven't let us down, really. As you say, they were quite good in that Kerry game, even though the result went against them. They produced a good performance, and I think that if we can produce a similar performance, a good performance, and focus on the performance in Cork, let the result take care of itself then. But I really do think that it's about getting that performance and getting to the level that they can get to. They've been together for the guts of, I suppose, 18, 20 months at this stage as a team.
Go back to minor when Niall Fitz has had them since minor about 4 years ago. They're the same core group of lads. And I suppose he's made a conscious decision that I'm taking lads with me from minor that will play football only. There's none of this, I'm going to drift off, maybe try and get on a hurling panel. He's selecting guys that he feels that are here to play football for Tipperary, not maybe use it as a bridging maybe year to go hurling. And which is probably a smart way of doing it.
Well, it probably is, because you can invest a lot of time and a lot of resources in players, and then the first sniff of a place on the hurling panel and they're gone. We've seen it in the past where very, very good footballers end up on the hurling panel, and you don't see them again kicking football for Tipp, and they're a big loss. But I think have there at the minute with that under-20 panel is a core group of players who want to play football for Tipperary and who are actually flourishing under the system that they're playing under, and they've gotten well used to playing with each other, and we are seeing that in the performances. So with a little bit of luck, things might work out for them in Cork. As you say, Cork, a draw will do Cork, so we have to go and win it. They know what it is. It's knockout football now, effectively. You win that game, it's a semi-final, more or less. You win that game, you end up in the Munster final, and that's a huge carrot for any Tipp team.
Yeah, and I suppose we'll have another show next week. But Brian, I was looking at the schedule next week. We have minor football Monday night, under-20 football Tuesday, under-20 hurling Wednesday, minor hurling Friday, senior football Saturday, senior hurling and senior camogie on the Sunday, and under-23 camogie Munster final on the Monday. It's I don't know where the supporters are going to find all the money, but it's next week, and God, hopefully the weather doesn't turn too bad. Because God, if you had a week like the last 2 weeks, and we're really heading in, I suppose that next week is probably when the nerves start coming, and I suppose people start getting their tickets for the Munster Championship. It's great to see, Ennis was going to be sold out, and I suppose Thurles not quite yet, but it'll be a big Limerick crowd, and I think it'll be important that maybe Tipp supporters find a way just to get in behind the team, and we saw the value of support in Páirc Uí Chaoimh when those goals went in. The place shook, and it's hard not to think that if you're an underdog, that doesn't get into your mind a small bit and scrambles your brain for a minute or two.
Yeah, look, Easter Sunday has been, etched in everybody's mind for quite some time. There has been a bit of in the recent past about Tipperary supporters maybe gone missing to. I think there's, there is more optimism, and I think that will mean you'll have firm Tipp supporters in us and everywhere else in fairness. So I think there is that, connection with the team. There is a lot of young players. Always brings optimism, and look, everybody where we stand at the moment, everybody in the Munster Championship is starting at zero at the same point. So it's, and I would like to have a huge amount of resources on any team or prediction. You'd be certain. I don't think you could be certain. I would Cork, except I think there's question marks about all the other teams. Are Limerick got a bit stale at this stage? Are they to the end of that great team? Clare, the last All Ireland they won, they had a very poor year, and as saying, with Waterford and Tipperary have failed to get out among recent years. So there's much to be decided. There's so much to look forward to. It's brilliant, and again, I know in Dungarvan last night, but to have it live on TG Car as well, it's able to watch all these players, particularly at the minor and under 20 level, to see them on television, to get familiar with these that we'll probably be seeing in our jerseys in years to come. I think TG are doing an absolutely wonderful job. I mean, club obviously are covering an awful lot of games as well, but it's brilliant to be able to, if you make it to a game that you can get to see it somewhere. I think there's an awful lot of positives out there, and fierce busy I'm sure Brophy you're on the road a good bit, but it's a great time of the year, with our club league games, and so whether Semple Stadium you're going to or down to your local club, you can be guaranteed there's something going on every evening. So it's my favorite time of the year, and I read Easter as well, and I can't wait for Easter Sunday.
Yeah, me too. And so we'll look ahead to that on next week's show, building up to the Tipp versus Limerick game. That's about it for this week's show. I want to thank my guests Noel Gunman and Brian Flannery, and thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with a Munster Hurling Championship preview. Bye for now.